there is actually decent scientific evidence that the compounds that we're going to mention in this video can in fact help you in managing your stress, treat a lot of the symptoms of depression, and in general help you live a better, healthier lifestyle. And what are these compounds? Well, they are called adaptogens. Adaptogens might just be the next big thing in nutrition after probiotics. They may be able to help people treat their anxiety, help them with depression-related symptoms, improve sleep quality, improve sports performance, even help them in losing weight. But what the hell are adaptogens anyway? Adaptogens are certain plant products like herbs and spices that can help your body adapt and adjust to stress. Now, stress can be both physical and psychological, and the body does have a physical hormonal response to emotional stress. And adaptogens can allegedly help the body respond better to stress by regulating specific hormones. Now, traditional adaptogens need to meet 3 specific criteria. Number 1, there has to be an abundance of scientific literature to support their function as adaptogens. Number 2, their function needs to be non-specific and help the body in various types of stress. And number 3, they must not have any adverse or toxic effect on the usual functions of the body. Donald R. Jans, which is an American herbologist and nutritionist, further broke down adaptogens into 3 categories. The first category is primary adaptogens, which are the ones that are the most widely studied and present the highest degree of effect on the body. And they are also the ones that meet the 3 criteria that we mentioned before. The second category is secondary adaptogens. They are the ones that do not meet all of the criteria that we mentioned before, and they also do not directly influence the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA axis. Now, this axis is important, and we'll get back to it a little bit later. And the third category is adaptogen companions. They don't have any effect on stress on their own, or any large effect at the very least, but they do work synergistically with primary and secondary adaptogens. And now that we have all that cleared up, for the purposes of this video, I'm mostly going to be referring to primary adaptogens, since frankly, they are the ones that are worth mentioning. Now, what types of adaptogens are there? Well, according to WebMD, there are over 70 types of herbal plants that can be considered adaptogens. And common examples include the hot right now ashwagandha, rhodiola rosea, ginseng, reishi mushroom, tulsi or holy basil, and many others. So how do they work? Well, we know that adaptogens help us manage stress. But let's talk about stress for a minute. What even is stress? Stress is a vague term on its own. It can be categorized by a ton of different ways. Stress can be physical or emotional. It can be chemical, environmental, biomechanical. It can be acute or chronic. Stress is usually used as a throwaway explanation to pretty much any sort of bad situation. But I do like this definition from an article I read while researching this video. And I quote, "Stress is commonly defined as a state of real or perceived threat to homeostasis." We know that all types of stress elicit some form of physical response by the body. Psychological stress, for example, will cause certain hormones to fluctuate, like for example, cortisol. So how can adaptogens help to fight against all of these types of different situations? Well, I mentioned the HPA axis before. The HPA axis is basically a collection of anatomical structures that serve as the primary modulators of stress in the body. It's not the only one, but it's a major important one. The HPA axis is made up by the hypothalamus, the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland, and the adrenal gland, hence HPA. Now, like I said, the HPA axis controls stress response. When an external stressor, let's say for example physical exercise, occurs, the body will cause a chain of reactions that will eventually lead to cortisol spiking up in the blood. After the stressful period has ended, the body will suppress cortisol levels back to normal. And this whole process is regulated in major part by the HPA axis. Another important system that regulates stress, or the stress response, is the sympathoadrenal system, which connects the sympathetic nervous system and the adrenal gland. Adaptogens can also affect that system. What adaptogens allegedly do is increase your body's resistance to stress and decrease the sensitivity to stress sensors, meaning that your body can handle a greater amount of stress stimulus before you actually feel the physical consequences of stress. Now, how exactly adaptogens do this isn't very well known, and in actuality, there's probably a ton of different mechanisms. Now, if you're kind of lost at this point, well, I don't blame you. So let's make this whole concept easier to digest by comparing it to something else: weightlifting. So imagine that this is your first time in the gym and you're gonna follow a standard chest workout, doing 3 to 4 chest exercises, not a lot of weight, obviously, because you're a beginner, and then you're done. Not only is your chest gonna be tired throughout and after the workout, but you're also gonna experience that dreadful delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS. Basically, because you're a noob, your body is very inefficient in handling that workout, and you get tired and exhausted very easily. Now, if you fast forward to 2 years later, you can now do much more work with much more weight, and you won't be as exhausted as back when you were starting. Your body has acclimated and adapted to the stress that you put it through and is now much better equipped to handle it. Now, this is what adaptogens allegedly do to your body. They make it adapt and respond to stress much better. But all right, let's get to the million-dollar question. Are adaptogens actually effective? Well, surprisingly, seems like it. Let's take a look at some of the research. The first study I want to look at is a systematic integrative review that studies the effect of adaptogens on depression-related outcomes, as well as their correlation to physical exercise. The review contained a total of 41 studies and a total of 5,922 participants, predominantly female adults, with most of them being diagnosed with moderate to major depressive disorder. And as a quick side note, an integrated review is basically a review that includes and combines findings from all types of research. That means both quantitative and qualitative research. The first review in general did find a correlation between adaptogen consumption and improvement in depression-related outcomes compared to placebo. By far the most studied adaptogen in this review is something called Hypericum perforatum, but you might know it by another name, St. John's wort. Now, St. John's wort has been used to treat mild depression and anxiety for many years now, and it seems to be fairly effective. And yes, it is classified as an adaptogen. Another adaptogen that showed promise in this review was saffron. Now, while the overall findings of this review are mixed, several articles did show a positive effect from the aforementioned adaptogens. The second review aimed to provide future prospective uses of adaptogens by evaluating current literature. It contained 56 studies overall, and there was no mention of the total number of participants. This review mainly focused on the adaptogens Panax ginseng, Siberian ginseng, marl root, and Rhodiola rosea. The studies showed generally positive effects from the adaptogens consumed, ranging from better sports performance, reduced anxiety and stress, increased calmness, and even weight loss, amongst others. And Panax ginseng actually showed the most promise in this research. Now, apart from the general systematic reviews, I also found specific systematic reviews for several types of adaptogens. And I'm gonna go over them quickly so this video doesn't become like an hour long. One systematic review studied the effects of ashwagandha on physical performance. It contained 13 studies in total. Result? Positive. Ashwagandha did work better than placebo. Another systematic review studied the effect of Rhodiola rosea on both physical and mental fatigue. It contained a total of 11 studies. Result? Mixed. 2 studies showed an effect on physical fatigue, and 3 studies showed an effect on mental fatigue. That said, literally all the articles studied had either a high risk of bias or reporting flaws, according to the review itself. Another systematic review studied the effect of maca on menopausal symptoms and contained a grand total of 4 studies, all of them being randomized controlled trials. The result? Positive. That being said, there has to be a huge asterisk put on this systematic review, since 4 studies is a very small amount of studies to draw any sort of concrete conclusion from. Still, it should be noted that maca showed a positive effect in literally all of the studies. And the final systematic review that I'm mentioning in this video studied the clinical efficacy and safety of Tulsi and contained a total of 24 studies. Now, the result is overwhelmingly positive. since literally all of the studies found a positive effect from consuming Tulsi on various markers like blood glucose, lipid profile, immune function, and neurocognitive function. That said, in the abstract of the review, the authors state, and I quote, "A total of 24 studies were identified that reported therapeutic effects on metabolic disorders, cardiovascular disease, immunity, and neurocognition." Now, I'm probably misinterpreting this, but it sort of implies that the researchers were trying to specifically find studies that already showed a clinical effect of Tulsi, maybe to check for its safety. I don't know, but if this is the case, then there's obviously a tremendous bias in favor of Tulsi actually being effective. So I'm putting an asterisk on this review as well. So that was a lot to cover. Still here? Good. Here's a picture of a cute fox as a reward. Alright, back to adaptogens. Now the research seems promising so far. That said, there's still a lot of research that needs to be done. Many of the articles studied are not methodologically ideal, have risks of bias, and to be frank, there's just not a lot of research in general to support the function of adaptogens. But so far, the research does show promise. Now, the extent of the effect of adaptogens on each individual remains to be seen. In all likelihood, there's gonna be a degree of individual response here. Some people may respond better to adaptogens than others. Something that's worth mentioning is that it's very clear from the research that adaptogens are in general safe to consume. They are considered to be supplements, so they're much less tightly regulated than drugs. That said, it's always a good idea to consult with your medical team before taking any sort of supplement, since some of them are known to interact with certain medication. Like for example, St. John's wort actually is known to interact with antidepressants. So make sure you do your due diligence. Now, would I personally recommend people take adaptogens? Sure, assuming that you are cleared by your medical team and you know that they weren't going to interact with any sort of medication that you're taking, I don't really see the harm in trying out adaptogens. The research does show promise, especially if you're suffering from stress-related conditions, or honestly, if you just have a lot of stress in your life, a lot of anxiety, it might be worth checking them out. Just don't expect any miracles. At the end of the day, they're just supplements. They're going to work best when combined with standard healthy practices like a proper nutrition and exercise. So to summarize, adaptogens are essentially herbal plants that can help in various stress-related conditions. They can help with both physical and mental stress. They can improve sports performance, allegedly. The research does show promise, although there's much more research that needs to be done, and in general, they are safe to consume. That was the video. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, then I would really appreciate a like. A comment would be even better. Perhaps even subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one.